In the 1980s, these R&B stars were everywhere. Their songs dominated radio, their faces filled album covers, and their voices became part of the soundtrack of an entire generation. Some had million-selling records. Others scored unforgettable hits that seemed impossible to escape. But then, almost overnight, the spotlight moved on. Some walked away from music. Others battled industry changes, personal struggles, or circumstances they never saw coming. And while their songs never truly disappeared, the artists behind them seemed to. Here are 12 R&B stars who were huge in the 80s, then suddenly disappeared. 12. Howard Johnson. So fine, blow my mind. Ooh. In the early 1980s, Howard Johnson looked like he was on his way to becoming one of R&B's next major stars. His breakthrough came in 1982 with So Fine, an infectious, synth-driven track that became a major hit and reached the top 10 on the Billboard performing, but his presence on the mainstream charts gradually disappeared. That's what makes his story so interesting. He wasn't a one-song novelty act who nobody had heard of. He had already proven that he could make a major pop and R&B hit. Today, So Fine still instantly transports many 80s R&B fans back to the era. But mention Howard Johnson outside those circles, and you'll often get the same reaction. Whatever happened to him? And that question is exactly why he belongs on this list. 11. Rockie Robbins. Some R&B singers leave behind a mountain of hits. Others leave behind one song so beautiful that you wonder why their name isn't better known. Rockie Robbins belongs in that second category. In 1980, Robbins released You and Me, a warm, romantic ballad that quickly found an audience on R&B radio. It wasn't built around flashy production or a gimmick. It was simply Robbins singing about love with the kind of smooth, vulnerable delivery that made early 80s slow jams so memorable. The record became a significant hit, reaching the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100 and establishing Robbins as a promising new voice. He followed it with albums and additional singles, including I Believe in Love, but none managed to capture the same level of attention. And then something unusual happened. The song stayed. The singer faded. You and Me continued finding new listeners through old-school radio, compilations, playlists, and the memories of people who grew up with it. But Rockie Robbins himself gradually slipped out of the mainstream conversation. He didn't become a notorious industry casualty. He didn't have a spectacular public meltdown. There wasn't some huge scandal that explained his absence. His story is quieter than that. He simply became one of those artists whose biggest record outlived his fame. And that's why his name can surprise even people who know the song by heart. Play You and Me, and plenty of R&B fans will recognize it within seconds. Ask them who sang it? That's where the mystery begins. 10. Joyce Sims. Joyce Sims didn't sound like someone who was trying to fit neatly into the R&B market. Her music sat somewhere between soul, funk, pop, and the emerging dance sound of the late 80s, And that crossover quality helped make her one of the decade's most distinctive female artists. Her breakthrough came in 1987 with Come Into My Life. The song became an international hit, particularly in the United Kingdom, where it reached the top 10. Its follow-up, All in All, also became a major success, giving Sims something many artists never get: more than one song that audiences genuinely remembered. She had the voice, the look, the songwriting ability, and the momentum. But the timing of her success also worked against her. By the end of the decade, dance music and R&B were changing rapidly. New Jack Swing was exploding. Hip-hop was becoming increasingly influential, and the polished crossover sound that had helped Sims stand out was beginning to compete with an entirely new generation of artists. Her later releases failed to recreate the impact of those early hits, and gradually, the international spotlight that had surrounded her began to fade. But here's what makes Joyce Sims different from many artists on this list. She never really stopped. She continued recording, performing, and appearing on the old school circuit for years. Her disappearance was largely a disappearance from the mainstream, not from music itself. And tragically, Sims died in 2022 at just 63 years old. Yet her music never completely went away. For anyone who remembers the unmistakable opening of Come Into My Life, Joyce Sims is proof that sometimes an artist doesn't need dozens of hits to leave a lasting mark. Sometimes, two are enough. 9. The Boys. Imagine being teenagers, signing to Motown, landing on television, and becoming one of the youngest R&B groups to make serious noise in the 1980s. That was the Boys, 4 brothers from California who seemed destined for superstardom. Bilal, Hakeem, Taj, and Kyrie Abdul-Samad first attracted attention as children before signing with Motown. Their self-titled 1988 album introduced them to a wider audience, but their real breakthrough came with Dial My Heart. The song climbed to #1 on the Billboard R&B chart and turned the brothers into legitimate teenage stars. Then came another hit, Crazy, and suddenly, the Boys weren't just a novelty act built around their age. They could actually sing, perform, and hold their own in a rapidly changing R&B landscape. But their Motown run didn't develop into the long-term mainstream career many expected. The brothers eventually left the label, continued making music, and later reinvented themselves as the Sons of Light, exploring a more independent musical direction. That's the part many casual fans missed. The Boys didn't really disappear, they grew up. But the teenage sensations who once appeared on television and dominated R&B radio were no longer the same commercial force. For listeners who remember Dial My Heart, their story is a fascinating reminder of just how quickly the music industry could move on from its young stars. 8. Jesse Johnson. Before Jesse Johnson became a forgotten name to casual R&B listeners, he was standing right in the middle of one of the most important musical movements of the 1980s. I don't want the diamond rings, I don't want romance. Johnson was a guitarist and songwriter for The Time, the Minneapolis group created within Prince's orbit. When he launched his solo career, he brought that unmistakable Minneapolis sound with him. Funky guitar, electronic production, sharp rhythms, and just enough pop polish to cross over. His 1985 solo album, Jesse Johnson's Review, produced the hit Be Your Man, which reached the top 10 on the Billboard R&B chart. Johnson followed with more albums and eventually scored another major R&B hit with Crazy, a collaboration with Sly Stone. For a while, the ingredients were all there: talent, connections, credibility, and a sound that was unmistakably his own. But Johnson's solo career never reached the superstar level many expected. As the 1980s ended, the Minneapolis sound lost some of its commercial dominance, while hip-hop, New Jack Swing, and a new generation of R&B performers reshaped the industry. Johnson continued making music and performing, but his mainstream visibility declined dramatically. And that's what makes his disappearance particularly strange. He wasn't some forgotten newcomer. He had been part of Prince's musical universe. Yet decades later, mention Jesse Johnson to many younger R&B fans, and there's a good chance you'll get a blank stare. I'm just a Mayfoo, baby. For a man who once helped define the sound of 80s funk, that's quite a disappearance.
You know what I'm talking about.
7. Surface. For a moment in the late 1980s, Surface had the kind of sound that seemed impossible to escape. Their records were romantic, polished, and perfectly suited for the slow jam era. And then, almost as quickly as they arrived, their mainstream moment began slipping away. The New Jersey trio first broke through with Happy, a smooth 1987 ballad that became a major R&B hit. But their biggest moment came in 1989 with Shower Me With Your Love. The song climbed to #1 on the Billboard R&B chart and crossed over to the pop audience as well. Then came The First Time. Released in 1990, the emotional ballad became Surface's signature song, reaching #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B chart. Suddenly, Surface wasn't simply another successful R&B group. They were one of the biggest romantic acts in America. But success can be strangely temporary. As the 1990s progressed, R&B became increasingly influenced by hip-hop, harder-edged production, and a new generation of performers. Surface continued releasing music, but they could never quite recreate the extraordinary momentum of those late 80s and early 90s hits. The group eventually went their separate ways, with members pursuing other projects. The music survived, the fame didn't. And that's why Surface remains such an interesting case. They didn't fade after one lucky hit. They had several major records, and even reached the very top of the charts. Yet today, many listeners remember The First Time immediately, while struggling to remember the group behind it. 6. Colonel Abrams.
Should I listen what you say, or listen what your folks say?
Some artists disappear because their records stop connecting with audiences. Colonel Abrams is a much sadder story. His biggest song became a club classic. His voice became instantly recognizable. And yet the career that seemed ready for another level never fully got there.
If you love one another, why should we let this
Abrams broke through in 1985 with Trapped, a hypnotic blend of soul, electronic production, and dance music.
ever think about ever settling down?
The song became a massive international success and helped establish him as one of the distinctive voices of the emerging house and dance movement.
Tears roll from my eyes, I feel a hurt inside. As I reach
He followed it with records like I'm Not Gonna Let You, proving that Trapped wasn't simply a fluke. Abrams had genuine staying power and a sound that connected with both R&B and dance audiences.
to see I'm so confused, I can't get out. See, I'm trapped. Like
But the mainstream R&B audience gradually moved in another direction. New Jack Swing was exploding, hip-hop was becoming more dominant, and the club-oriented sound that had made Abrams so distinctive became increasingly separated from the mainstream American R&B market.
see, I'm trapped.
He continued recording and performing, but his commercial profile declined.
Your folks are in the way, and I don't know what to say.
Then came years of financial and personal hardship. Abrams eventually struggled with homelessness and health problems, and in 2016, he died at just 67 years old. That ending makes his story especially painful, because when you hear Trapped today, it doesn't sound like the work of someone who was destined to be forgotten. It sounds like a record that should have opened the door to a much longer mainstream career. Instead, Colonel Abrams became one of those artists whose influence survived far beyond the fame he received while alive. 5. Meli'sa Morgan. There was a time when Meli'sa Morgan's voice was one of the most recognizable sounds in 1980s R&B. She had the kind of delivery that could make a song feel intimate without ever becoming overly dramatic. And her biggest record gave her a permanent place in slow jam history. Morgan had already worked as a backing vocalist and member of the group High Fashion before stepping into the spotlight herself. Her breakthrough came in 1985 with Do Me Baby, her sensual remake of the Prince song. The record became a major R&B hit and established Morgan as a serious solo artist. She followed with songs including Fool's Paradise and If You Can Do It, I Can Too, building a respectable catalog during a particularly competitive era for female R&B singers. But Morgan's career never reached the superstar level her talent suggested. The industry was changing quickly. New Jack Swing was beginning to dominate. Hip-hop was reshaping R&B, and younger singers were entering the market with completely different sounds and images. Morgan continued recording, performing, and working in music, but her mainstream visibility gradually diminished. And that's what makes her easy to overlook today. Meli'sa Morgan didn't lose her voice. She lost the spotlight. For longtime R&B fans, though, Do Me Baby remains proof of just how powerful she was, and why her name deserves to be remembered alongside the bigger stars of the decade. 4. Ready for the World. Few groups went from being almost completely unknown to having a song that defined an entire moment in 1980s R&B as quickly as Ready for the World. The Flint, Michigan group exploded in 1985 with Oh Sheila. The record was a phenomenon, climbing to #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts. With its electronic funk, seductive vocals, and unmistakable groove, the song sounded like the future of R&B. Suddenly, Ready for the World was everywhere. Their self-titled debut album went platinum, and the group followed with hits such as Love You Down, which became another major R&B success. For a young group from Flint, the trajectory looked almost unstoppable. But the problem with reaching the top that quickly is that everyone expects you to stay there. As the decade progressed, the sound of R&B changed. New jack swing was taking over radio. Hip-hop was becoming increasingly influential, and the competition was brutal. Ready for the World continued releasing music, but their later work couldn't reproduce the extraordinary commercial impact of those early records. They never actually stopped making music. The group continued performing and recording, while individual members pursued other projects. But the mainstream spotlight was gone, and that's why their story is so fascinating. Oh Sheila still sounds like an enormous hit because it was one. Yet ask younger listeners who made it, and many have no idea. Ready for the World didn't disappear from music. They disappeared from the center of it. 3. Kashif. Kashif wasn't simply an R&B singer who disappeared. He was one of the people who helped change what 1980s R&B sounded like in the first place. Born Michael Jones, Kashif became a pioneer of electronic soul, embracing synthesizers, drum machines, and digital production at a time when many traditional R&B records were still dominated by live instrumentation. His work helped lay the foundation for the polished, futuristic sound that would define much of the decade. As a solo artist, he scored major hits including I Just Gotta Have You, Lover Turn Me On, and Love Changes, his memorable duet with Meli'sa Morgan. He was also an accomplished songwriter and producer, working behind the scenes with major artists. In other words, Kashif wasn't just riding the 80s R&B wave, he was helping create it. But by the 1990s, the musical landscape had changed dramatically. Hip-hop was becoming increasingly dominant. New jack swing had transformed mainstream R&B, and Kashif's electronic approach no longer occupied the center of popular music. He continued producing, writing, teaching, and developing new musical technology, but his name gradually became less familiar to the mainstream audience. Kashif died in 2016 at age 59, leaving behind a legacy far larger than his later visibility suggested. That's the irony of his story. The man who helped shape the future of R&B became strangely easy to forget. But listen closely to 1980s soul, and you'll hear Kashif's fingerprints everywhere. 2. Stacy Lattisaw. By the time she was barely out of her teens, Stacy Lattisaw had already experienced a career most singers could only dream about. She had been recording since childhood, scored major R&B hits, appeared on television, and became one of the most recognizable young female voices of the early 1980s. Her breakthrough came with songs like Let Me Be Your Angel and Jump to the Beat, establishing her as a major teen R&B star. Then came her partnership with another rising singer, Johnny Gill. Their duet, Perfect Combination, became a major R&B hit and showed that Lattisaw was capable of growing beyond her teenage image. But then, just as her career was entering another phase, Stacy Lattisaw stepped away from the spotlight. Unlike some artists on this list, there wasn't a spectacular career collapse or a disastrous final record. Lattisaw made a personal decision to leave the mainstream music business, eventually focusing on her family and her faith. And that makes her disappearance particularly striking. She had the talent, she had the hits, she had the industry connections. She simply chose a different life. Lattisaw later returned to music in a more limited capacity, including gospel-related work. But she never attempted to recreate the mainstream R&B career she had built as a young star. For fans who remember early 80s R&B, though, her voice remains unmistakable. Stacy Lattisaw didn't get forgotten because she failed. She stepped away while people were still watching. Number 1. Lillo Thomas. Lillo Thomas had almost everything an R&B star needed in the 1980s. The voice, the looks, the songwriting, the major label backing, and the kind of sophisticated sound that could have carried him well into the next decade. His breakthrough came with his 1984 album, Let Me Be Your Love, which produced the R&B hit, I'm in Love. Thomas followed with successful releases including My Girl and Sexy Girl, establishing himself as one of the promising male voices of the era. He was also a talented songwriter who worked with other artists, giving him credibility beyond his own records. Then, in 1988, everything changed. Thomas was involved in the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing, which exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland. He survived the crash, but suffered catastrophic injuries, including the loss of both legs. His music career was effectively brought to a halt. Think about how different his trajectory might have been. Thomas was entering the period when New Jack Swing and contemporary R&B were about to explode. He had already established himself and was positioned to enter the 1990s with serious momentum. Instead, he had to rebuild his life after a tragedy that had nothing to do with music. Thomas eventually returned to performing and recording, but he never regained his former mainstream visibility. And that's why his story belongs at number 1. Lillo Thomas didn't disappear because audiences stopped caring. His career was interrupted by an unimaginable tragedy. And sometimes, the saddest answer to whatever happened to that singer is that they were simply dealt a hand no artist could have prepared for. Some stars fade from the spotlight, but their music never truly disappears. Which of these 80s R&B legends do you still listen to today? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to R&B Vault for more forgotten classics and legendary stories.